What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? If any of you are out there, late starting show today, not our usual start time, 5 p.m., like the worst possible start time, in my opinion, for this show. Competing with some of the big guys out there, obviously, as I know you guys know. Appreciate anybody who is here hanging out. Looks like a couple people in the room so far. Welcome. Tuesday show. Messy 7-game slate to break down. We've got a lot of known knowns already. We've got a few just lingering known unknowns. And then always the curveballs of the unknown that tend to jam us up a little bit as we get toward lock and make things frantic for some of us. But looks like a good one. I'm kind of interested in playing this slate. We've got a lot of pieces of value. We've got some differentiation, as you can see in that DraftKings column and on the FanDuel side from where the slate is at with some of these things. So I'm really looking forward to talking this one through. Going to try and talk quickly. My goal is to get out of here by like 6. Usually when I say that, we're off at like 6:15, somewhere in that territory. So we're just going to kind of dive in. I'll let people trickle in as I start reading through the board, and they can rewind and play on extra speed. But not a ton of time since we're starting late today. Trav, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you. Welcome. So, starting things off, the Celtics at the Raptors. Celtics favored by 11, one of the best teams in the league against one of the worst teams. 226-point total. Anything that comes up from the Boston side, certainly you can get to. There's a couple of guys out. We'll get into the ins and outs in just a second. But Drew is resting tonight, most importantly. Al Horford's still questionable, so we'll see what happens with that. We could have a little bit more emergent value because Cornet is out as well, so we might get some of those cheapo big men for the Celts. But they might also just run small and not give those guys tons and tons of minutes where they really hit value. So I think it's still a little bit fragile. On the Raptors side, mix and match pieces and parts. There are some high-end players, though. So we'll take shares of whatever comes up. Cleveland at Orlando, a 220-point total in that one. Kind of a grindy game, but obviously good players on both sides. Cleveland favored by 8 on the road. Immediate takes from that one, honestly, nothing leaps to mind. Let me see if anybody's hitting the top of the board here. Yeah, as I'm looking down, I mean, nobody really hitting in our top 25 as sorted by exposures in DraftKings lineups. Then it's Franz, Wendell Carter. I don't know why. I almost pronounced Wendell Carter like Vendel Carter, like he's one of the Wagner brothers. But I was actually expecting it. But Franz and then Wendell Carter right there. And then really not much else coming up from that one. I wonder if anything's coming up on the FanDuel side. Not really. It's kind of a low total, and again, grindy game, so I can see why. And those guys are all basically appropriately priced. The Spurs and the Pellies. Pellies favored by 3, 239.5 point total. Spurs obviously still without Wembanyama. Some upside in that game. It's obviously a juicy total, so we'll see what comes up as far as pieces and parts on both sides. A little bit of interest in Zion, obviously, as a high-end point per minute guy. He's in the middle of the board there. Looks like just medium shares on him, though. Up top, Kelly Olynyk coming up as a value play quite a bit. A little bit of Jose Alvarado's on the board there. Some Trey Murphy a little bit further down next to Zion. De'Aaron Fox coming up just outside the top 25 is sorted by DK, but under the field. It's an interesting one. I actually thought we'd get a little bit more of that one, just given the total and some of the pricing on guys in that game. The next one is really interesting. Phoenix at the super pacey Memphis Grizzlies. Grizz favored by 7.5, 245.5 point total there, supporting a ton of weight from that game on both sides. That one's really interesting. Milwaukee at Houston. Houston favored by 3.5, 227.5 point total there. Usual pieces. I mean, maybe some Giannis will come up. Maybe some of the odds and ends, at least in like the 8 to 10% range for medium type exposures from the guys from the Rockets. Maybe we get to some Şengün. Depends on how center falls together. Let's say. Oh, yep. Looks like we're getting quite a bit of Şengün, actually. 33% on DraftKings at 8,500 and 8,600. Those are pretty good prices for 1.36 per minute on both sites. So, yeah, a lot of Şengün. That works out. And then a very before that one, Dallas at the Lakers. Luka Doncic revenge narrative if you're a narrative chaser. Can't really think of a better player to chase narrative with if that is your thing. I usually shy away from that because it's not something you can project, so on and so forth. But, I mean, we are talking about a ball-dominant guard who basically calls his own number whenever he wants, also facilitate the entire offense. He's got a superstar playing next to him, mediocre teammates outside of LeBron, but Luka's pissed. Luka did not want to leave Dallas. Luka, we don't even know if he ever wanted to be a Laker even. We're back to full minutes for Luka. So it's a really interesting spot. Again, we're not really looking through that prism, but that is kind of at least tickling the back of the mind. On the Dallas side, everybody sucks. P.J. Washington is questionable. Could get messy around the bigs again for Dallas. And then a really messy already Charlotte team in Golden State. 217.5 point total is not encouraging, but there are some Charlotte values on the board because basically everybody's out. Golden State is favored by 17 in that game now, though. So that is just an absolute mess. As far as the ins and the outs go, I just updated up on the site. Probables, Neemias Queta and Xavier Tillman are both probable. Grady Dick, Giannis is probable. Gary Trent and LeBron, all probable. Questionables, Al Horford as mentioned. Jakob Poeltl is questionable. That'll be an interesting piece for Toronto to get back. Darius Garland, Dylan Brooks, Jayshawn Tate, Monte Morris, Trace Jackson Davis, Dwight Powell, PJ Washington, all questionable. And then outs, Drew Holiday, Luke Cornett, Brandon Ingram, PJ Tucker, Jalen Suggs, Mo Wagner, Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis, Cody Zeller, Cody Martin, Yuki Kawamura, Charles Bassey, Victor Wembanyama, Brandon Boston, Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, LaMelo Ball. Here come the Hornets. LaMelo Ball, Daquan Jeffries, Trey Mann, Brandon Miller, Josh Okogie, Tijani Salon, Grant Williams. All those guys out. Going to be messy. Jonathan Kuminga, Anthony Davis, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively, all out. Caleb Martin, Maxi Kleba, both out as well. Handful of people here. If you're new here, subscribe. Check out rotoscouts.com. I sincerely doubt any of the 7-8 people that are here are new and just found us today. Probably most of the regulars out there. Again, worst start time possible for this show. I get why we got a small crowd today. We are trying to get through in the next 52 minutes, though, the entire slate here. That'd be a record speed run for us, but we'll see how we do. Sorting by DraftKings on all counts today because we have the same 7 games on both sites. So let's cut for some positions. We'll go guards. All right, so Charlotte, we have some fragility here. I gave Damian about 28 minutes. He and Elf have been playing tons and tons of minutes in these spots. I gave Elf 26. He's right here. It's not like we're far off the mark. We're getting tons of both guys. It might just swing on starting, what the starting unit looks like for that just disgusting team with all of everybody out for Charlotte, but there's gonna be some guard value here. And they're both super cheap. Bow's been playing all right in his limited run. 3 games, 28 minutes a game. Not a lot, but he's been putting up 0.92, 0.90 on DraftKings. At his 3,600 with point guard and shooting guard eligibility on DraftKings, currently he is our most highly exposed guy in our top 150. For every minute that you reduce that, and you can easily project him for 24, 25. I am on the higher end of what his projection is, but if you look at that average, I'm right at what he's averaged. Like I said, a little bit fragile. So 56%. Could come and go. That is against significantly lower ownership from where the ownership that the sim ran against. So your results could swing all over the place depending on where you're getting ownership and how they're looking at these Charlotte minutes. But Elf, by the same token, is also very cheap, has also been at least effective in his return to the NBA, 0.89, 0.87 on these 10-day contract spots. So going up against Golden State is not an ideal spot. Again, they're 17-point underdogs in a game with a terrible total, but it is the end of the night, and it is a critical source of value on this slate where there's not a ton. You know, we don't have those like cheapo Utah guys. We don't have, right now anyway, Charlotte is that team. So we're getting a lot of them. Fortunately, a lot of the rest of the names up at the top of the board here, and it looked like the same thing was true for basically the full slate. We're getting to a lot of really good players. Like Desmond Bane in that highly totaled, pacey Phoenix-Memphis game. Absolutely. 40% on the FanDuel slate, 5.13. We're over the value threshold at 7,600 shooting guard and small forward eligibility. 7,100 he's shooting guard only on DraftKings. We're getting him to 5.75. We're looking for only 5.5 there. That's a monster value score from a really good player. 1.18 per minute on DraftKings for the season. 51% and above the field. He's popular, but we got him more than half our lineups in that sim in the top 150 lineups by results in the sims that ran. So that is a very significant piece. I love Bane at that $7,100 price. That's just cheap. I'm kind of surprised they've got him that low for 1.18. I got to keep in mind that we're trying to hit time, but I think this is an interesting exercise to do from time to time. 71 buys you 118 there. 72 buys you 121 technically out of RJ Barrett, who we didn't really get quite as much. 2 fewer minutes on RJ. But that's all right. So that price range for those two is similar. But then you got to bounce up to 75 to get 125 out of a center, which is kind of a different type of play. You're about 500 more expensive to get to similar rates on a lot of guys. And then 114, 113 from cheaper guys, but both are centers, which again is a little bit different than guard forward eligible guys. It's a really, really good price for Desmond Bane. It might also be at least sneaky kind of a play on RJ Barrett. He didn't come up at all, as you can see, 2%, but he is at least affordable, and you can reasonably see him playing an additional 2 minutes. He averages over 33. I've only got him at 32. He played 31.9 in their last game, put up just under a point per minute, but he's better than that. So since we are below the field, but since the field's probably in single digits as well, that's a guy that you can at least consider like a rotational piece. But I do think it's really interesting, the cheap price at 71 on Desmond Bane, and we're getting tons of them. Whoa, who was that? Hold on. Who's that $3,000 player we got 12% of? Oh, it's Keta. I guess that makes sense. I've got him at 16 minutes. That's with Horford questionable. If Horford doesn't go, there could be more time there for him. So watch that one, because that's a very cheap price. He's not great, but he's a 0.86 per minute player. We'll get there in a little while. I just wanted to see who the min... I noticed min price and 12% just as I was sorting that. All right, so that was 2 players down before our first tangent. Yeah, power, that drives me nuts. I wish Underdog would start up a separate handle, like NBA _underdog tomorrow, something like that, where they would do Wednesday news and Tuesday, Wednesday news, and just because it gets so messy sometimes, especially on larger slates where it's like, wait, shit, is that game today? And I'll panic and I'll like pull up the sheet, stop what I'm doing. It's the worst getting all that same news on that same channel. Vince is looking all right. 3,600 shooting guard small forward eligibility on DraftKings. Puts him in a 5.36. That is technically below our value score, but just as a cheap building block play, he just gets into lineups because of that price being so far under. Look at the prices, the comparative prices for everyone else who's coming up. He is the only guy in the threes until we get all the way down to Bruce Brown at 3,600. Same price all the way down here. I only gave Brown 18 minutes. It's a 0.81 per minute where you're getting him under the field. Field's at just, probably 2-3% here. So if you want to consider Brown a lower end alternative for a couple shares, fine. But Vince looks like the play here. I've got him at 20 minutes. It's right at what he's been playing. He played 19.8 in their last game. He only put up 15.7 FanDuel points. We're not looking for a ton. He's projected for under 20. Obviously, we need like mid-upper 20s from him. But he's got that ability, and he's got decent usage. He's not a drop-dead 12% usage guy. He's not a 0.56 type per minute guy. 0.94 per minute this year on 18.9% in his 8 games, is 16.2 minutes since he returned from injury. Not bad. And there's upside for more, especially if he continues to play more minutes. Again, that was 4 more minutes essentially than what he's averaged in the first couple games. But that's also a team that gets really, really messy with those minutes as you go down that bench. So a little bit of fragility on that. Elf, we talked about Bradley Beal on the other side of that game coming up quite a bit. Devin Booker coming up quite a bit a couple spots later. Beal's minutes have been up. He's only averaged 32 overall for the season, but all those top 3 guys on Phoenix have been playing a ton of minutes lately. So I've got Durant and Booker both in the upper 30s. I think I gave them both 38. Book's right there. Book I gave 38. And then Beal I got at 36. You could easily see Beal drop back to 34. You could project him at 34 because the range is probably 32 to 36, 37. But he did play 41-4 in that last game. Put up 36 FanDuel points in. He was 0.93 per minute player this year, 0.99 last year on the same usage. It's Bradley Beal. We know the player pretty well. He's not inappropriately priced. We had him 10% of the time on the FanDuel slate, level with the field, 26% of the time on DraftKings for 6,400, level with the field over there too, but that's a good price. 0.94 per minute We're not far off the mark with that Beal play. If he gets more popular than that, though, directionally, I think I would go downward with Beal. And I'm more interested in getting more shares of Booker, and I think more shares of Durant. We'll see where Durant came up. Let me actually pull that up real quick. Booker's the one I'm really curious about down there. Okay, Durant we're getting plenty of on DK. So we've already got our 48% of Durant, but it didn't look like we had enough Booker to really satisfy me here. Just being level with the field at 19%, I think there's a lot of upside there. He's multi-position eligible point guard, shooting guard. We got plenty of him on FanDuel. He's 9,300 shooting guard, small forward on the FanDuel slate. Different eligibility probably had something to do with that. 35% and well above the field on the blue side, though. Happy with that. I'd like to be at like 25. If the field's 18, 19%, give me 25, give me 28. If I can get 10 percentage points above the field and build a little position on Booker, who is not over our value threshold, but 5.28 out of Devin Booker playing 38 minutes a night, tons and tons of time, tons of upside. He was a 1.23 per minute guy last season on the same usage, on the same team. They're going up against a team that is going to play at a super fast pace. It's a great spot. So happy to get that, but I'll take shares of Beal and Booker and Durant all across these lineups. I'll take shares of multiple guys from that team, and I'll take both sides of that game. I really like that game overall. Jose Alvarado coming up decently on DraftKings. Below the field, though, 18%. So we've got some in our pocket with a 5.16 value score, but he's probably just getting boxed out by some of those better values from the guys that are slightly cheaper, the $4,900 Mo Moody type plays. I think I skipped over Moody. Podziemski as well. Kind of jumping around here. Oh, that's what happened. I went from Beal to Booker and skipped over the two Warriors. So going to these two guys real quick. Usual complement of minutes for those two guys going up against an inept Charlotte team. The thing with all the Warriors is, for one, there's a little bit of just mishmash minutes as you go down the bench with that team as well. For number two, they're favored by 17 tonight against the Charlotte G League team. There's a pretty good chance that they just light this team up, and maybe guys like Podziemski end up not playing the full end of the game. So there's a little bit of blowout. It's not something we're going to project, but these guys are not completely to the moon kind of upside plays. I think we're fine in our mid-20s exposures here. We're a little bit above the field on both on FanDuel. I think that's okay getting to the end of the night, have some swappability there. On DraftKings, we're like level with the field in the 20s. Podziemski, we're technically a little bit below the field. They're probably at like 25. Either of those guys is fine. I don't know how much I would want to overload on Golden State, though. And that's the thing. We're getting those two. We're getting Buddy a couple spots later. We're getting Steph a couple spots after that. So we are getting a lot of exposure to these guys. And there could be some limited upside for some of them. I've got Buddy projected for low 20s minutes, right around his season-long average, but he's bounced around a little bit with the Dubs. There's a little upside for him. Steph at 33 could get a little bit fragile. He could be one of the guys that ends up, they're up 25 points in the fourth. Probably not going to see Steph, Draymond, those guys play out the fourth quarter. So they'll probably fall short. They'll still look good. And in a lot of ways, those guys will have made value in that case if they're lighting up the Hornets. But it's a little fragile having a ton of Golden State all piled into one. I think I want a lot of them spread across a bunch of lineups, but I don't know how many of all of them I want in one lineup, right? I don't think I would want like 4 Warriors, especially because I want room for Memphis. I want room for Phoenix. I want room for some of these other pieces. So just be a little cautious about that. But if it comes up, if it goes through Sims and process and everything, perfectly fine. That's always going to be the answer to, how guys go together. So trust the process, as they say. Going back to Alvarado, 6,200 is fine. I think he's a mixer. 3% below the field on FanDuel. If you have a little bit more, if you're at the field, it's not terrible. 0.99 per minute this season. Usage is up a little bit year over year. He's a good enough player to support those numbers. 18% exposure below the field on DraftKings. I think having a position like that, especially relative to a board where everybody above him, basically, we're above the field or right with the field. So we got to make some cuts somewhere. So he's probably fallen a little bit victim to that. But again, he's not a bad play at 55. 700 cheaper than on FanDuel, 5.16 value score. Between the two sites, he looks better on DraftKings. Buddy and Steph we just talked about, but sandwiched in between them, we've got Ja. I put him at 32 today. He's only averaged 29 over the course of the season, 35 games. We know he's been in and out of the lineup. We know he hasn't been playing full minutes, but they've been up a little bit lately, so I'm encouraged by that. He played 34 in the last game, put up kind of a disappointing score. In 34 minutes, you'd expect Ja to crack 45 fantasy points. He only put up 37.4, but obviously that's a low-end game for him. 1.28 per minute on 29.8% usage on FanDuel, 1.33 on DraftKings. Ja is a potential monster in this game. And the field's not crazy about him. We're above the field at 39% on the FanDuel slate. He's above our value threshold. He's only 8,100 over there, 5.06 value score. Same price on DraftKings has him at a 5.22 value, 17% exposed and level with the field. I wouldn't mind taking Ja a little bit up. Like if you're looking to move out of shares of nobody really similarly priced here. If you're looking to pull some of these, but that's Booker, and again, I want more of Booker. But if you're taking Booker in the other direction, or let's say you've got a lineup that landed like Beal KD in it already, and you don't want the third son for whatever your reasons are, then that's a reasonable alternative. Getting to Ja for significantly cheaper and spending up on something else. Steph also functions that way. And they all got exposed essentially the same. So there's some swappability between these two. That one, depending on how you see Booker. But again, Suns upside for days. So between the three, actually, the way I think you should probably run it is take some shares from Steph, see if you can add them to Booker. That's probably the closest, most immediate source of upside shares to get more Booker in your life. You could obviously take away all your Luka shares, but I don't know that you want to do that, and we're already well below the field on Luka. Wow, didn't get him at all on FanDuel. You really got to press things to get to him in that revenge spot. Much as I want to talk about it. That's interesting. We'll get there. So yeah, Steph is probably among guard-eligible players anyway, like direct pivots. Steph is probably your easiest path to get to more Booker. Lineups that have 200 left over, that's obviously a very, very easy swap. But Steph, again, does look good. Trey Murphy, the price is just where it needs to be for him. We've ridden the value on Murphy through, the first half of the season, and then the price kind of corrected, and now he's just been in the upper mid-range tier, and he's good. 1.06 per minute, above 20% usage, 22.8% usage rate, and he's been playing well, 60.7% true shooting, 16.4% assist rate for him. He's a good player, shooting guard and small forward eligibility. 8,100 is, again, correct. 8,400 on FanDuel is correct too, maybe a couple bucks high. We got him at 11% and probably slightly under the field here, but close. Same thing on DraftKings, 12.6%, further from the field, but still relatively close overall. Same thing with Jaylen Brown. Essentially level with the field, 8% there, 11% here, slightly under on both. Plenty of swappability back and forth between these two players as individuals, whichever one you like better. Perfectly fine to go to. Jaylen could see a little additional upside with some missing pieces for Boston. And if Horford doesn't go, that's another potential missing piece. So it could be a little bit more on the board for Jaylen. Apparently there's some kind of convoy going by outside. Somebody's just pulling like the trucker horn. Nuke, what's going on, buddy? I'm trying, man. This one was for you. Was it you yesterday that said you need this show every day? I was thinking about that as it was like 4:45. The reason everything was late today. There's a 12-game NHL slate, and a lot of teams were just like kind of messy, coming off of the Four Nations and the All-Star and everything. So just so much time went into NHL today. I was behind on NBA, but it was like 4:30, 4:45. I'm putting the stuff up there, and I was like, man, those guys wanted to have the show. They need it every day. Jump on. Let's see. So that's why we started at 5. Pirtle out. As Millie points out, Jakob Pirtle not going to play. Scotty Barnes will definitely go up. That encourages me a little bit more on the RJ Barrett play as well. There'll be a little bit more upside for RJ. The issue there is just going to remain it's a bad Toronto team going up against the Celtics, and not having one of their best players is obviously not going to do good things for them. But that'll put Orlando Robinson back on the board probably for big man minutes. Jonathan Mobo will get his minutes back. He was projected for like 2 in the I went Robinson over Mobo as the backup, but that could go either way. But now that Pirtle's out, those guys will get their minutes back, what we've seen recently in the last 5-6 games. So we know what that looks like. but they'll at least be mixers among the big men. So yeah, Jalen could see a little bit of additional upside, but his numbers, he's fine. You know, he's not mispriced. He's a lot like Trey Murphy in just, you know, a little above 1, but not superstar caliber in terms of his DFS value, his DFS scoring. It's weird to say about Jaylen Brown, but he's a better NBA player than he is a DFS player. At least at these prices. If you were getting him a couple $100 less on DraftKings and in the 7s somewhere on FanDuel, it would pump his value up pretty decently. Right now, just an Izzy spot. Pritchard with some upside, 5,700. We're getting him 4% on FanDuel, 8% on DraftKings. Minutes go up in this situation. There's a little bit of potential there for him as well. But again, another guy who's just kind of not inappropriately priced and falling short of the value threshold. Nick Smith, 16% on FanDuel. There's at least believability in, you know, him getting his 32 minutes or so that we've seen him get in these situations when everybody's missing, but certainly not my favorite player. 0.69 per minute, and that's despite having a 20% usage rate. Usually we see those 0.69 guys. It's somebody like Max Christie, right? 0.70 this year out of Christie, but that's explained by him. He's not a high usage guy. 14% usage. You expect lower production. Last year, 13.2, 0.66. Nick Smith has a 20+% usage rate both of the last 2 years. Exactly the same 20.2. He put a 0.67 on that last year, 0.69 this year. Nick Smith, not good. Price is not incorrect. 5,200, he's more difficult to reach on DraftKings. Honestly, at a 4.88 value on DK, this is a lot closer to the mark. So I get why we're above the field here. But even here, I would probably draw it down to like 12 and just be level with the field. I don't see it as advantageous. Over here, a 4.88 value when we need 5.5. I'm sorry. Give me anybody else. Give me these Peyton Pritchard shares. I'll take Peyton Pritchard back to the field. I will take every one of those Nick Smith shares and put them into Peyton Pritchard, take him back to the field. It's just a much better option. And that's just illustrated right here. Right? What's that? A quarter of a fantasy point per minute better? That's a no-brainer at the same price. We got them both below the field, and it looks like we're actually technically a little further from the field on Pritchard. But between the two players, as far as which one you're going to want, it's difficult for me to believe, even in an enhanced situation, that Nick Smith outperforms Peyton Pritchard if you roll this slate 10,000 times. Jalen Green, 13% exposed on FanDuel, perfectly fine. He's a role player on this slate, 8% on DraftKings. 7,300 is not mispriced. Shooting guard only, no flexibility there, no real value. He's not popping, but it's in his spot against Milwaukee. Chris Paul, the Spurs are interesting. The Spurs in the ownership that this ran against were super popular. I wasn't really seeing them that way. I think they're fine. But I didn't really see a need to get them in the like 40-50% range, which is where some of these guys were projected. So we're going to come up below the field probably across the board on the Spurs. But that does still, you know, Chris Paul, 5,900, 18% exposed in our lineups. It's just a hard undercut to where their ownership was. Not sure where they're projected for ownership at other places. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see it. On DraftKings, 7%, 5,800, mix and match piece. Max Christie, Dante Exum, mix and match players. We are getting some Exum at 4,200 on FanDuel. It's only a 21-minute projection. I don't love that. 0.97 per minute out of Exum. We got him 15% of the time and level with the field despite being a 4.36 value. Something fishy there. That might be just one of those price oddities where this price just fills spots. Because that is not value. We want 5. I mean, we're getting some 4.3 here, some 4.5s up there at higher prices. I think that's just a spot filler. I don't love that spot. And then the last differentiated guy, Amin Thompson, not a bad name to find down here. 14% on FanDuel for the 8,900 that they're asking. Shooting guard, small forward eligible. 1.08 per minute so far this year. I'll take some extra shares of Amin beyond the field. I don't mind that. 84 on DraftKings, just 3%. Technically a better value on DK, and I love that point guard small forward flexibility that he provides. We got him a lot less. I think that's probably a product of just getting boxed out by significant exposures to those guys. But he's at worst a guy to keep in mind for some swappability. That's a not bad price, 84 for the 1.05. And for the upside of minutes, he plays major, 36, 37 minutes. RJ, we mentioned, numbers probably go up slightly with no Pirtle. Mix and match pieces the rest of the way. Nobody all that interesting. 12% of Dame hiding down here at 8,900 on FanDuel. That's level with the field. We got essentially no Dame at 93 on DraftKings. It's just cheap on FanDuel. 8,900, not a bad price for Dame Lillard. Kyrie, we got 2% FanDuel. We got one share on DraftKings for 91, 9,200. It is Kyrie Irving. There is upside there, no doubt. Freddie Van Vliet, mix and match piece at best in his return. One share on both sites. Devin Vassell, again, another undercut to the Spurs. He doesn't look popular on either anyway, but mix and match at best. And then some clear upside guys, right? Donovan Mitchell, Scotty Barnes. Scotty's going to go up for sure. We got him just 2%, but this one's going to climb. 9,000 eligible at both forward spots on FanDuel. 86, another point guard, small forward eligibility guy on DraftKings. There will be additional upside. Does he get to like this kind of territory? I don't think so. We're probably talking more in like this range. He probably becomes another swappable guy in this group of like relatively high-priced upper middle class type guys. I think that's where he lands in the rerun. Let's get to forwards. I'm going to put centers on the board as well as we've been doing lately, and I'm going to take a sip of this coffee. I've been holding this mug for the last 15 minutes in my other hand off camera. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. I don't know why I didn't stop to take a sip. Yeah, Power, I don't disagree. I think we do lose Al. I've been kind of leaning that way throughout the day. We should have it in plenty of time. But especially, the fact that it's how did they list it? Ketta Tillman probable, Horford questionable, leads me to believe that they're going like exactly what you said. On the front end. Male Nurses Rock, what's going on, bud? I miss you too. I'm here most days. Gonna be here every day for baseball season, for the most part. But yeah, it's only when these things get away from me, as far as the slate sizes, the time that it takes to put this stuff together on the front end before a show. I always want to be here. It was so much easier shows-wise when it was like I'm still doing my projections, but that's not what I was showing on the show, like back at the old place. And it was just like all I needed to do was grab the stuff from the site and put it into this, and then I could talk about everything. This was literally the same file I used then, though. It was differently configured because I was pulling just the Awesemo data from board to board. But this was what I was always using in the background to like look at it. And it was just so much easier because I didn't have to reproject every time something changed. So there's time like through the day to like have a good idea what was going on, look at everything, look how the board looked, put it all together, get on a show in plenty of time. A little bit hectic with NBA. It's going to be fun with NBA lock colliding with MLB lock. But at least MLB is nice and gentle. We know what those lineups are going to look like most of the day, and then it just goes up and is what it is. Where NBA is just constant tweaking throughout the evening. I'm thinking, though, MLB-wise, like probably earlier in the day shows just to free up that time. I don't know what NBA shows are going to look like going through that as MLB gets started next month, though. So we'll see. We will see. Hit the like button. Check out rotoscouts.com for all your projections needs. NBA, NHL up today. 12-game NHL slate. 7-gamer for NBA. MLB coming soon. NFL coming back in the fall. All of that is included for under $1 a day. Anything else that hits the site ever is always included for your money. No per sport nonsense, no surprises. So check that out. And check out our guys over at acemind.io also. Promo code RotoScouts, all in caps, get you 20% off your first month. Let's dive into forwards and centers. So KD, totally happy with our KD exposure now. I love the power forward center eligibility as well that he carries on DraftKings. Power forward, small forward on FanDuel. We got him 30% of the time, so KD on FanDuel is like my Booker on DK. I just want more shares of those guys from Phoenix. I love that spot and just the aggressive pace at which that game's going to play and that monster total in what should be a very competitive game between two pretty good teams. So give me more KD on FanDuel. We're essentially level, probably a little bit below the field, but you can see for a superstar caliber player still, we're above the value threshold. Anytime we see that, I'm happy to take more. So all the KD you can carry on both sites. We're already getting him 48% of the time and ahead of the field on DraftKings. Totally fine. Vince, we talked about him on guards, but just as a refresh, 44% on FanDuel, 46% on DraftKings. That is on a 20-minute projection. There is a little bit of like 4 or 5 minute fragility there. So just be wary, but he's coming up like crazy at those current values, especially on DK at 3,600. Just a cheap building block guy with some realistic production. 0.9, not nothing in his limited action this year, 0.89 last year. Şengün, a very good center option on a day where we're kind of light on very good center options, honestly. That's probably another reason we're getting to so much Şengün. But he's only 8,500 on the DraftKings slate for 1.36 per minute. That's tremendous. That is a great price. 33% exposed in our lineups. He's a 5.33 value. Technically, we are shy of the 5.5 that we're looking for, and we are getting that 5.5 out of Kelly O in just his 24-minute projection in the next spot down. But he's got power forward eligibility. We've also got the util spot to work with, so these two guys go together a lot, I'm guessing. You're probably going to get a ton of lineups on the top end of results in the ahead of lock results, Sims and everything, with both of these guys in on DK, at least as it's projected right now. There is potentially a little bit of fragility in either direction on Kelly O's minutes. 25 in the last game. He put up a 30 FanDuel score, 1.02 per minute on the season in limited run, 26 games, just 16 minutes a night. My question is, does he fall back toward that 16-minute mark? It's probably an 18 to 24 range, something like that. So just be aware you could get a little bit of downside on Olynyk there. But Şengün's the one to talk about, and we're getting him, again, 42% of the time on FanDuel at 86. Definitely looking like the center of the day over there. 5.25 value when we're only looking for a 5. Love that spot. Who are our center-only guys? Let's see. 42% to Şengün. Nothing going to Keto right now, but that could change. On FanDuel. On DraftKings, we already talked. Keta's got 12% on because he's min-priced. 3,800 on FanDuel is not working. Let's see, just 3%, 2% on Edey and Wendell Carter. 1 share of Yves Missi. A couple shares of Plumlee and Nurk. Don't need those. A few shares of Jackson Hayes are coming up. So that's what, 60%. So there's a lot of room for our power forward center eligible guys on FanDuel today to go into the center spot. Or there's a lot of room to just take Şengün further north, which I think would probably be my favored move among all of these guys. If we get Al out and then we get that Celtics big man value, that could be a little bit different. And it's wildly different on DraftKings. For one, you can get multiple bites at the apple, like I was just saying in regard to Kelly O. But you've also got some very cheap Keta on the board, 3,000. We're getting him 12% below the field, technically. I don't remember where the field was at in the projections that ran against. That's on 16 minutes. He's not going to jump radically. Even if he starts, I don't know that I'd take him further than the mid-20s. I'll look at what the numbers have looked like in starts. There is no Cornette, though. If we get no Horford, there's going to be some time there for him. Tillman will also hit the board in that situation. At the min price, he's going to go way up. And we know that at 3,000, if his projection changes to like just 17, that's going to end up in this territory. If it goes higher, it's going to end up further and further. So for every little bit that he gains a lot of ground in where you want him as far as exposure. So just bear that in mind when we get the Al Horford news. Beal, we talked about. Santi Aldama, we're getting him 30% of the time on FanDuel. That's above the field, 5,600. He's got power forward and center eligibility. He is one of those guys that goes through either spot. I do think it works. I'm just concerned with the messy, I mentioned it before, just the mess of minutes from Memphis once you get out of that top 3 guys. Diana Taurasi retires. Leading scorer in WNBA history after 20 seasons. Congrats to her. So, I just have it's another one that I would call fragile. I only projected him for right around his average. So that's the good news. The better news is there's upside beyond that for another 3 to 5 minutes. And it's a piece from that Memphis Phoenix game. The bad news is he can tend to dip to 20 minutes, 22 minutes from time to time. And everybody in the middle for Memphis just kind of plays mid-20s minutes with a little bit of just back and forth depending on game flow and whatnot. I do expect they're going to want him out there, so I don't think it would be unreasonable to project him at like 27 and call the range 25 to 29. He played 29 in their last game. He put up 29.7 FanDuel points. 112 per minute FanDuel, 114 per minute DraftKings. He is good in a DFS sense. So I don't mind the option, but I also don't love the option. We're a little bit below the field on DraftKings, 24%. I think that makes sense. Either side, I'm not wild about this. I'm probably happier to be in that position against the field, but you've got a lot of them on both sides, and there's not a huge difference between 24 and 30% exposure ultimately. It's just how we're playing against the field. Moody, as mentioned before, Moody, Podziemski, Buddy Hield is also right here. Any of these Golden State guys are going to come up a little bit, but they're favored by 17 against a team full of backups. Draymond's also right here. Jimmy's also right here. So you can see, again, how much of all these guys we're getting. It's just a matter of how big a car crash pileup do you want of Golden State Warriors in all your lineups. I think you want one or two of these guys in most. If you get a lineup that comes through with 4 of them and it's gone through process, fine. I don't know that it'll be a ceiling-capable lineup just because of how much I expect them to destroy Charlotte. But we get a lot of surprises in the NBA these days, so who the hell knows? Any one of those guys, though, in any given lineup, totally fine. Any 2 of those guys in any given lineup, totally fine. Just be wary. Triple J, not a bad option. 26% and above the field on FanDuel. Just shy of the value mark. But again, anything Memphis Phoenix today is looking pretty decent to me. I mean, maybe not like Zach Edey down here, who caught my eye immediately after I said that at just 3% on FanDuel, 9% on DraftKings. But for the most part, and especially among the stars, anything Phoenix, Memphis, happy to be above the field and have a position there. Just as happy to be a little bit below the field, still have 16% in my pocket, but have a position on him on DraftKings. That said, 7,700 is a pretty aggressively good price for 133 per minute. Like, by comparison, you're paying 9,700 for Jason Tatum's 138. Those are 2 radically different players, but a $2,000 price difference when it just boils down to what that rate is at that power forward spot that they share? I don't know that that's necessarily justified. In a game environment that greatly supports more upside for Jaren Jackson? Jason Tatum is one of the very best players in the NBA. Jaren Jackson is on another tier down. But there's a $2,000 price difference with positional commonality there. It's a 10-point projection swing. But technically, you've got a better value score on Jaren Jackson. More ceiling on Jason Tatum on most days, I would say. But it's not as far off as the 2 names and the prices would suggest. That's an interesting wrinkle on the DraftKings slate there. Tatum, though, as much Tatum as you can carry is perfectly fine. 18% on DraftKings. Just keep in mind, you've got a perfectly viable swap there for $2,000 less. That's a really interesting swap at worst. Given that, I might consider taking Jaren Jackson a little bit north on DK, and maybe you build back to the field. It would be difficult to say get above the field unless you're really giving up a lot of Tatum position. I guess you could do it with some shares of KD. If you wanted to take a little bit from Tatum and a little bit from KD and build back on Jaren Jackson, it's not a wild idea. KD's 8,900 with a shared power forward, and he only plays at 1.23. But again, massive upside gain from that game. But that's a really interesting price on Triple J. Draymond falls into that bucket of Warriors perfectly fine in any given lineup. I don't know that he even gets to 30 minutes if they're just completely crushing that team. He only played 27 and he only averages 28.5. So buyer beware with Draymond in addition to any of the aging Warriors. Jimmy is also right there. I've got Jimmy at 33 minutes. For the season, he's averaged 30. He only played 28 last time out. They're going to crush this Charlotte team by all accounts. 12% below the field, 12% below the field. I think that's appropriate. Murphy, we've discussed. Zion, I mentioned early just in passing, just for the per minute value. 157, 158 across sites. I've got him near that territory today. I think a little bit below it. 9,200 power forward only on FanDuel, 4%. I wouldn't mind a few more shares. If I had to build a position, I'd probably take him up because there's not much room to take him down. On DraftKings, 13% and below the field. This is probably correct. I think you stay in that kind of range and still have some in your pocket, but keep the position against the field because you'd probably have to hit like 30 to have a plus position that's at all reasonable. But a very good per minute guy. At worst, another guy to keep in mind for swaps out of some of the other, 85 here at center for Şengün. And if you want to swap it for $8,500 Zion and call it the util spot, not crazy. You get fewer minutes out of Zion, but you get better production per minute. Miles Bridges can definitely benefit in this situation from Charlotte. If we're looking for Charlotte guys to play outside of the just free value squares, it is Miles Bridges. We saw him explode 4 or 5 games ago in essentially this spot, put up a monster, and is capable of doing that. But this season overall, 117, 120 for 8,200 on DraftKings, for 8,500 on FanDuel. I think I've illustrated some of what you can pay for some per minute numbers. That's one of the lower ones in that mid 8s. So I think he's very good. I think it's an okay enough option, but I think on DraftKings it's appropriate to be around that. On FanDuel, we got him a lot. Probably a product of closer to the value mark on FanDuel, despite the higher price. We got him 30% of the time and a little above the field over there. It's got to be something to do with just the way the positions are falling that opened up a little lane for him to get into. He's not far off the value mark, but I'd probably rather have a couple of the upper guys if we're talking about the power forward spot. I think I'd rather spend 83 on Triple J there than 85 on Bridges, even with the advantageous spot for Bridges. Another interesting one. But 30% and above the field, totally reasonable. At worst, you can level that down to the field and just try and get to more of these guys. That might be a reasonable path to get to more KD, but there's $1,000 separation between the two still. So that's still a lot to overcome. Franz Wagner, 13%. FanDuel, 11% DraftKings. At worst, a mix and match piece, but I just don't love anything out of that Cleveland-Orlando game. As I said, we'll take shares of whatever. Wendell Carter's a couple spots later. We saw Donovan Mitchell on the front page, or on the guards page rather, front page, as we're going through the newspaper. So any shares of any of the top end guys from this Orlando Cleveland game are fine, but I don't know that I'm really chasing any value on anybody. So Franz at 13%, being above the field on Franz is great, especially when you don't have to get crazy high exposed to him at 13. If you wanted to take that to 15, that's fine. If you wanted to take that 11% on DraftKings to 15 and get out a little further ahead of the field, I do think that's okay. But it's not a great spot for Franz against the Cleveland Bigs. Who else is interesting? We talked about Nick Smith. We're getting 9% Keldon on FanDuel, 6% on DraftKings. Again, I'm not wild about these San Antonio guys, but they were highly, highly projected for ownership at the site that I draw the ownership from to run these sims. So, interesting inflection point for the slate in San Antonio there. Royce O'Neal, I'll take shares of Royce O'Neal for sure from the Phoenix side. That's a potential window into just a low-owned angle of Phoenix. He's not unowned, but he's low-owned. He's an okay option, 0.87 per minute FanDuel, 0.88. He's a low-usage guy, but he's capable across the board in all categories. He's got multi-position eligibility, and he's cheap. He's not free, but he's cheap, 53, 48. Not bad. We got him 8% below the field here, 6% level with the field. If I end up 10% on Royce O'Neal there and a little above the field, I don't mind it. On DraftKings, I don't think I would push much beyond this 8 and stay below the field, even though he's cheaper and technically better value. I think I would just kind of chase the position rather than like what the value looks like on that one. LeBron, obviously excellent on FanDuel, 2%, on DraftKings 6%. We're level with the field, below the field on both sites. At worst, he's a very good alternative to any of the other stars on the board in any lineup in any case. It's LeBron James. Just don't overthink it. That said, he's coming up as non-critical. His price is correct in the range where it is. He's played the season at 138, 144. I've got him on DraftKings scoring in the lower 1.5s if memory serves. So perfectly viable, tons of upside. But if you're going to a Laker, it's just so tempting to go to Luka today. Exum, again, I don't love that he's coming up at 15% at that low value mark on FanDuel. I'm very curious as to why that would be happening. On DraftKings, you don't really have to worry about it. Mix and match piece. Jonathan Isaac, no thanks. Jarrett Allen coming out of the Cleveland side of that Cleveland-Orlando game. 4% on DraftKings below the field. Again, Allen's another guy who could absolutely succeed in this game. Anybody Cleveland from the starting unit, anybody Orlando from the starting unit could provide some upside, but nobody's really coming up as critical. Giannis, not really crushing it. 2.6% exposed on DraftKings, below the field for 11,000. One share on FanDuel. Part of that is just the 32 minutes. It's too shy of his season-long average. It's right what he's been playing in the last couple of games. I think that's what we get again. If he goes for 35 minutes, though, obviously the upside returns a little bit more, and there's clear ceiling on the play. So, again, any given lineup, any given share, swappability for superstars as at worst, it's Giannis. Don't overthink it. Hayes, Dylan Brooks is technically questionable. If he plays 16% on FanDuel, he's viable, but he's another pretty low production guy. 0.70 FanDuel, 0.72 DraftKings. For 5,000 on DK, even if he's out there, I don't think you really want him. But on FanDuel, we are getting there a little bit. He's another guy, though. We're well off the value mark. So I think he's just a functional piece, even though we are above the field there. Nothing to get excited about. Brandon Clark, 6%, 1%. Again, Memphis from the lower end, the back of the bench, the midboard of the bench. You get fluctuations in minutes. I've got Clark right around his 18-minute average, technically a 19-minute average. He's fine, but I don't think there's anything to get excited about there at 42 on FanDuel, even the power forward center eligibility. At 39 on DraftKings, there are just better options. He just didn't really come up because of how much we're getting to some of those guys. Strus, Najee Marshall, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, if he goes, coming up lighter than the field on both sites. It's been interesting of late. 7,400 is not a terrible price. He's 1.0 per minute on both. Plenty of run if he goes, but really not crushing the board. 4% of Klay is technically a little above the field, but none of these guys are showing good value. There's really not much hiding down here. Scotty, again, will go up. No Pirtle will get a little bit of a rate bump for Scotty. Biyombo, I'm expecting minutes for, but at 5,600, we're getting no value. Even with 22 minutes on at 5,600, we're at a 3.58 value score out of Biyombo. He played 30 in the last game and put up a 39, though, so know that there is that capability there, and just watch where the minutes trend. Jabari, decent enough value among all these guys down here. We only got him in 2% of lineups. Not much to love there. The mix and match player, the 4.79 value is what catches my eye, just as compares to a lot of these other guys that came up a little bit. So maybe he's at least swappable with some of these other guys in the fives. And since he's a little bit lower owned than some of them, maybe there's a little edge to be had there. We're talking about a 0.77 per minute player this season. That's not ideal. Not what we're looking for, really. Horford out. All right, there you go. Thanks, Power. That was 5 minutes ago, but I appreciate it. Yeah, I think we're going. I think we're probably going to see the Keta version of that, the Keta Tillman version. But there is definitely the potential for Boston to continue to just start small or to play small throughout the game. Start Keta playing 16, 18 minutes and play small through the game. So just be wary of that. I do still think it's a little bit fragile, but that is definitely going to bounce Keta because, again, he's min-priced on DraftKings. So I've only got him at 16 minutes, and you were already getting him in 12% of lineups. We're below the field there. Right, but let's say you have no faith. You think they're going to go small. If you give him, oh wait, if you give him 2 minutes, it's like, yeah, maybe. Right, you're already getting that. So you're right below our value threshold if you give him another 2 minutes, essentially, estimating. And I think we're getting more. But that's like what he would look like if they went small. So we'd probably still be chasing the field up the ladder there. But if you get him to 20 minutes, if you get him to 22 minutes, it's just exponential build. So that value is going to shoot up the board. Keep an eye on it. What else? Michael Knack, what's going on, man? Any interest in a $3,700 Guy Santos? He didn't come up in the discussion there. Let's see if he's on the board at all. I know he's projected. I got him at 16. We did not get a share of him on either FanDuel or DraftKings. I think what you'd be looking there is you're just trying to like pick off cheap blowout run. And it's not something I could project for him, really. You'd have to throw him at least the 20 minutes that he played in the last game. In that one, he played 19-9, put up a 21-1. I think the biggest issue with it is we've already got a bunch of guys in essentially that price range that look better and have more, projectability to it. But if you're chasing blowout for a guy who isn't getting any shares, I mean, we got none on FanDuel, and that's level with the field. We are technically below the field at the $3,600 on DraftKings, but we've already got, here's a $3,500 center at 7.3% exposed. Here's a $3,600 shooting guard small forward that we're getting 46% of the time. Here's a $3,600 point guard small shooting guard that we're getting 56% of the time. Again, on the Charlotte guards, there's a lot of fragility there. Keep an eye on where those minutes projections go in the next hour. And as we get beyond lock, that's the last game of the night. But, I don't think we're getting there with Santos. If we get something weird, like, people out, keep an eye on what happens with that Golden State team. There's a reasonable chance they just flat choose not to play a couple of those guys. Surprise, Steph Curry is sick. Yeah, he's sick. They're 17-point favorites against, again, the Charlotte G League team. So it wouldn't shock me if we get some changes for Golden State. And in that case, then you might extract some value for those guys. I do think that's at least a good case. You're going to have shares in that game anyway. But there's a good case to be made for keeping like 2 spots for that game in most lineups. Just for some swappability around what happens there. With that in mind, you guys, 5:59. We're like right on the dot here, and we're actually through the whole slate. Look at that. Look what we can accomplish when I just power through and just continue talking for the entire hour. Appreciate all you guys. Check out rotoscouts.com. If you're new here, subscribe. If you've never subscribed on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. It's free. If you want to subscribe at Rotoscouts, even better. It's under $1 a day. You get MLB, NHL, and NBA all in for under $1 a day for projections. So check that out. Check out our guys over at acemind.io. And good luck out there tonight, guys. Somebody go win something. Share it when you do. Send screenshots. Pop them in the Discord. Let me drop a quick link to the Discord for anybody new. So good luck. Somebody go win something. And I will see you. Link is in the chat. I will see you tomorrow, guys. Later.